On Friday, we were talking about the Gemara that mentioned that Ruvain's name. How was Ruvain? The name Ruvain was with the difference between my son and my father-in-law's son. And it was comparing Ruvain to Esav, and how Leah had mentioned, look, I am better. See that I am better than my father-in-law. Now my husband's going to love me, and so on. And that was, that was the Gemara that we learned. And Howard's question was, does that mean she actually was thinking that? Does that mean she was, was she really, did she really say that physically? And so if you look, the Marsha on the Gemara, and on the previous Gemara, says it can't be that it actually was physically, she was thinking this and she was saying this. Because on the previous Gemara, the Marsha says that we don't find when the calculation of all the women prophetesses are calculated, it doesn't mention Leah's name. So Leah was not a prophetess. And because the Gemara Megillah counts all the prophetesses, and it counts Sarah, counts Dvaira, Chana, Miriam, Abigail, Huldah, Esther. It counts all the 7 prophetesses, and but it does not count Rivka, Rachel, Leah. It doesn't count them as prophetesses. So the Marsha says we can't say that she's really a prophetess. So therefore, you have to say that Hashem put the name Ruvain in her mouth. She was, of course, thinking Ra'ah Hashem ba'anyi, as the pasuk says. But Hashem, when he put the word Ruvain in her mouth, Hashem had this idea in mind. And Hashem was, so to speak, putting the name as a divine inspiration, but not prophecy. That's the meaning of this name, Re'uma bein Benila bein Chami, the difference between my son and my father-in-law's son. So the Marsha says because of the fact that it doesn't count her as a prophetess, we can't say she had this in mind. Because she couldn't have seen all that. Now, the problem with learning this way is that we know Rashi brings down that she was a prophetess. Leah was a prophetess because she knew how many children Yaakov was going to have. So there are midrashim that seem to say clearly she was a prophetess. But the Marsha is learning this way. And I mentioned on Friday that the Kislev, which is the Ein Yaakov, he writes on this Gemara. It's called the Kislev. When he explains the Gemaras that he brings, it's called the Kislev. And the name of the sefer is Ein Yaakov. I think his name was Mahari ben Chaviv, Mahari ben Chaviv. So he also seems to follow this logic, and he says Hashem put the name Ruvain in her mouth, that meaning behind it. But the Maritzchias, you take a look, I have a Gemara with commentaries in the back. There's a Maritzchias in the back who says that even though the Torah gives a different name, nevertheless, we find in Torah 2 reasons for other Shvatim. For example, it says by Yosef, let's take a look actually in the Chumash. Here we have in Parshas Vayetze. So what happened when Rachel gave birth to Yosef? She said, Asaf Elakim Eschar Pasi, and she called him Yosef Hashem Li Bein Acher. It sort of gives 2 reasons. Now, that's not the only one. Yisachar. Let's take a look at Yisachar. Leah said, Nasan elakim schari, and Asher nasati shevchasi liishi. Hashem gave me my reward that I gave my maidservant to my husband. She calls him Vatikra Shema Yisachar. So it says Ki Sachar Secharticha V'gam Nasan Alakim Schari. So the Marzchias learns the previous pasuk is also sort of a reason, because the previous pasuk says she said to Yaakov, "You should come to me because Sachar Secharticha v'dudoy b'ni," and that sounds like he's Sachar also. And he slept with her that night, and Hashem heard Leah, and she gave birth to a fifth son. And Leah said, "Nasan alakim schari," and Hashem gave me my reward that I gave my shifa. So it looks like it's two reasons, at least the way the Marzchias is learning the psukim, because Sachar Scharticha, I paid for you to be with me. It sounds like Yisachar, and then Nasan alakim schari, which clearly is the reason for Yisachar. So but there's basically two reasons. And the same thing is Zvulun. Zvodani, Leah said, Zvodani Elakim Oisi Zeved Toiv. God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will make his permanent home with me, for I have given him 6 sons. And she called him Zvulun. And So it seems like two reasons. Hashem has endowed me with a good endowment. And then it says, Yizbaleni Ishi, he'll make his permanent home with me. So it seems like it has two reasons. So once the Torah itself is showing us that there's numerous reasons, so we're able to explain, the Chazal said, the others also could have extra reasons, and then it says, then the Marzchias says, because we find in Bereshis Rabbah that there is a medrash that says that all the mothers were nevios, and they had Ruach HaKodesh about the future. So there is a medrash that says that all the mothers were nevios. So that sort of contradicts the other Gemara. So we have a medrash that says the women were prophetesses, and the Gemara in Megillah says there were only 7. So in order to answer this contradiction,
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard this before, but I was by a bringing of the Rebbe in the late 70s, and the Rebbe was referring to the Emos, and he included Bilhah and Zilpah.
Really?
Yeah, he was specifically talking about Rachel and Leah, and he said on our Emos, Rachel and Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, and it was stood out in my mind that I remember, decades later, that the Rebbe referred to them as Bilhah and Zilpah as Emos.
But I'm wondering if the Rebbe said in that same sentence, prophetesses, nevios.
That I don't know.
See, that's where I don't think it says that, because what I'm bringing to you is a few sources that the mothers were the mice were considered prophetesses, and I think in those sources it limits it to Rachel and Leah. That's what it seems like. Again, listen, there's numerous midrashim on the Torah, and I don't know all the midrashim, but from what I've seen, it seems to, sort of limit the prophet. First of all, not everyone agrees. Like the Marsha seems to follow the view that they were not prophetesses, but there seem to be sources that they were prophetesses. And what it seems like is a machlekes in midrashim, in gemaras. One gemara implies yes, one gemara implies no. One medrash implies yes, the other medrash implies not. So the Marsha has explained our gemara based on those midrashim that feel the mothers were not considered prophetesses. Now, the problem is, so what do you do with that gemara in Megillah that says these 7 were prophetesses and not the other mothers like Rivka, Rachel, and Leah? So number one is we know Rashi clearly says that they were prophetesses. And if you learn that they were prophetesses, then you learn our Gemara normally that Leah actually said, look at the difference between my son and my father-in-law's son, because she saw the future. She was able to say that. If you want to learn that she wasn't a prophetess, then you have to say Hashem put the name Ruvain in her mouth because of this reason, this extra reason, even though Leah had her reason, Ra'ah Hashem ba'anyi, like the pasuk says, Hashem had another reason also to put it in her mouth, and so there was another reason, but she didn't know that reason. She didn't know what she was saying. It was Hashem's reason. Now, what do you do with that Gemara? The Gemara says that they were not, it seems to say they were not prophetesses. You have to learn that Gemara to mean that they didn't have prophecy that was applicable for the future of Klal Yisrael. They were prophetesses for themselves, but their prophecies were not effective for the Bnei Yisrael. Therefore, they're not called prophetesses. In that Gemara, when it talks about prophetesses and it only counts 7, it's only speaking about those that were their prophecies were effective for the future for Klal Yisrael. They weren't just for them. Wasn't just for themselves. It had some effect on Klal Yisrael, and so that's how you translate that Gemara. So I must say that the Chumash Torah Tamima, he brings these points down, and in Parshas Vayetze, he brings down these different opinions. So there, he brings down the different sources. But in any event, to answer Howard's question, there are 2 ways of learning our Gemara. And initially on Friday, I wanted to learn it, that the reason to say that Leah did not think of this is because the pasuk says clearly a different reason. So that would be a reason why maybe you would say that Hashem was thinking of this, but her reason for it really was a different reason. In other words, if you learn, like the Maharsha learns, that Hashem just had this other reason in mind, then the pasuk goes very smooth. Leah named him Ruvain because of that reason. She didn't name him because of the look at the difference between my son and my father-in-law's son. That wasn't why she named him that. That was why Hashem put that name in her mouth. But Leah's name, the pasuk fits very smoothly. If you learn like the Maritzchias and like the other, sources, so then you would have to come up with an answer like the Maritzchias says. We see from other sources that we see from other psukim that the Shvatim had 2 names. So you could say here also there were 2 names. In other words, even though the pasuk says one reason, there really was another reason for the name. Not 2 names, 2 reasons for the names. We see the other Shvatim had 2 reasons for the names. Here also, we could say that there might have been another reason as well, even though the pasuk doesn't say it clearly. And so, in other words, it's not a contradiction. Now, Rashi, interestingly enough, in Chumash brings down this reason as well. And I mentioned that the Rebbe has a whole discussion, a whole essay on that. And the reason why the Rebbe has a whole essay on it is because it's surprising. Why does Rashi have to bring a Gemara down, which doesn't seem to flow smoothly with the pasuk? Because the pasuk says this reason, and Rashi adds a Gemara reason, which doesn't seem to fit, because the pasuk clearly says the reason is Ra'ah Hashem ba'anyi. Hashem saw my pain. So why is Rashi going and jumping to the Gemara and saying, by the way, the reason why his name is Ruvain is because look at the difference between my son and my father-in-law's son. That's the reason. The reason is because the Gemara says that. The reason is because the pasuk says, "Look at my suffering. Now, my husband hates me." That is Hashem saw my suffering because my husband. That's the reason of the pasuk. Why would Rashi jump and make a problem and make a question? Why are you giving me another reason that it doesn't say in the verse? And so, to answer that question, the Rebbe has a beautiful insight. He says that Rashi is answering the question of how does Leah know that her husband's going to love him now? Her husband's going to love her now. How does Leah know that? In other words, it's not necessarily so. Just because she had a son doesn't necessarily mean her husband's going to love her. And especially because the other Shvatim, the other patriarchs had sons, and the firstborn was always problematic. They weren't such great sons, the Yishmael and Esav. So how does she know now her husband's going to really love her? On that, Rashi brings our Gemara to explain the reason for the name. So in other words, Rashi brings this Gemara to show that this is the reason why Leah thought her husband's going to love her, is because this son is a unique son. And she had prophecy of how this son was going to be unique. And because of that, she said, even though Esau was evil and Yishmael was wicked, nevertheless, this son, I'm sure my husband's going to love me. And so this Gemara explains why she was so convinced. And so that's another path to take, which follows the logic of Leah was a prophetess. Okay, which is Rashi's opinion. In any event, now that I think we've covered this topic quite thoroughly, let me answer.
Can I ask a question?
Ben, sure. What is
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
You giving a lot of reasons why the names were called for more than one reason, and as if God is really the one that named them. Is that what it means? That all the ones that had two reasons, actually God put their name into the women's mouth?
No.
Or was it just Reuven?
No. I said one opinion explains that Reuven had that by Reuven, that was the meaning behind it. And that's the Maharshal.
But you brought other examples like Yosef.
That was the other opinion.
Zvulun.
Yeah, those examples were following the other logic that Leah herself had said that. And the other reasons, the Pasuk says clearly that Leah said all those lines. So she actually said those things as well. And that view, which is the Maritz Chias, he explains that that's why the Gemara has the license to add another reason to Reuven's name as well, because we see that the other Shvatim had also more than one name. And the Pasuk, even though it doesn't clearly say there are two reasons for this name, but it does sort of say the other reason in the Pasuk or in the previous or two Pasukim before. So it sort of gives the Gemara
where did they take the other reason from?
In which case, by
where
which
did they bring the Gemara? Where did the Gemara bring it from?
The Gemara has a tradition, but still, it would seem to it seems like where's the origin? They have this tradition, so the rabbis of the Talmud, they understood that this is the meaning. The question is, how does that flow with the pasuk? So the answer is because you see the other pasukim also have two reasons. So that's how it flows, and it's not a contradiction really with the pasuk. It's like there is another reason, and it doesn't contradict the fact that the pasuk says one reason and you're adding a new reason, because we see that the other shvatim had more than one reason. So it sort of flows and it fits within the way, the style.
Yeah, but the reason the Gemara brings would really change the name from Reuven to Rubain. There should be a yud between the bet and nun if you're showing a difference.
Generally,
that's why I don't understand it.
Generally, when the Gemara and when even the Psukim, when they name someone based on words, they're not all inclusive of every single letter and syllable that was part of the reason. They generally take the main sounds of those letters, and they put it together. And so that's why you have, you know, names that are not very
Differences.
long because they leave out a few of the letters that aren't as emphasized. And so that it's not really such a, you know, it's not a problem. Because otherwise you're going to have a name that's very long. So they leave out certain words, you know, they're just bringing the main, they're summarizing it into a one name word, which is like an acronym almost for the other words, but it doesn't, you know, that's not always so.
Well, a
exact.
yud,
So a
another
yud would be,
yud wouldn't take too much room, but I
yeah, but
understand what you're saying.
but at the same time, a yud has doesn't really make much of a sound in this word. You know what I mean? It's not a major
It
sound.
changes it to Bain.
I understand, but nevertheless, it's not changing the sound
Okay.
that much. You know, it's not like adding on a major sound.
Rabbi
So
Smith.
yes, David.
Maybe this answers Ben's question. This is in Rabbi Steinsaltz. He says the Medrash is aided by the similarity between the words ben, son, and the word bain, between. It only uses the word bain once, but it's understood as if it was written twice. So it refers to bain and ben. It's basically Ben's question. And he says that the Medrash is already dealing with this by using it once, but it's as though it's written it's understood that it's written twice, referring to Ben and Bain. And this statement comes to praise Ruvain, because although the impression one gets from Yaakov's blessings is that Ruvain was flawed, nevertheless he had praiseworthy qualities as well. So for how somehow they're relating that to Ben and Bain.
I'm not really sure I understand that. Does he have a source?
No, it's just under notes on that. See the difference between my son and the son of my father-in-law. He says this medrash, and he doesn't say which one. He says this medrash is aided by the similarity between the word son, ben, and the word bain, between. Even though the word is only used, it only uses the word bain once. It's understood as if it was written twice. The second one referring to ben.
So, right, I'm not really sure if, well, ma bein beni leben chami. What's the difference between my son and the son of my father-in-law? So really, it should say Ben twice. And now it's interesting that our Ben Resnick is the one asking the question, whose name is Ben. But you know, that's just a little just interesting. But
maybe his name is Bain.
But that's a nice explanation.
But I'm not really sure.
In other words, somebody else saw the same thing I'm seeing, you know.
But I'm not really sure I understand that reason. I'd have to look at, you know, try to understand it, because the fact that it says it once, Ruvain. Now, maybe because we pronounce it Ruvain, maybe that is good enough without the yud. Or the fact that it's pronounced Bain, but it only says Ben, is emphasizing both. Maybe that's the idea. In other words, or maybe this is a new explanation. I'm not sure if this is what Rabbi Steinsaltz means, but maybe you could say that because it's pronounced Bain, but it's spelled Ben, so it's almost like it says both, Ben and Bain. And therefore, the Gemara Darshans, Ruvain, see the difference between my son and my father-in-law's son, because it's bringing out both. Because on the one hand, it's pronounced one way, but it's spelled another way. So that sort of combines both. Just a thought that comes to my mind, because I don't really understand the fact that it says Ben one. How is that answering the fact that it should say it twice? I think it should say it 3 times. It should say Ben, and Bain. It should say all 3 of them, right? I'm not really sure how the fact that it says Reuven is answering it. But anyway, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on this. You know, you're welcome to share your thoughts. We always love hearing from everyone. Don't be shy. Okay, so now that we've gone through this piece of Gemara, we are going to go further, Metz Hashem. We are on page Ches 8b. No, 7b, excuse me.
Or D.
B.
D we did already, yes.
Maybe I heard wrong.
7b. So we are up to the Gemara where we spoke about Avshalom and Gog and Magog, and we mentioned that David HaMelech had said, "How great are my tsaros." Let me mute everyone.
Rabbi Smith, I just wanted to say, while we were talking about the Emos, so I looked up on Google, and there's a place in Tveria called Kever HaEmos.
Yes, I've been there.
So there's Bilhah, Zilpah, Yocheved, the mother of Moshe, Zipporah, the wife of Moshe, Elisheva, the wife of Aaron, and Avigail, one of the wives of David HaMelech.
I just remember like Bilhah and Zilpah in my mind. And it's been 20 years since I've been to Eretz Yisrael, but I remember being there in Tveria and going to that. I believe it was Tveria going to that. Yeah,
Tveria.
So, But now, so why are you bringing that? What are you seeing from that? That you think that shows more like they were prophetesses or just they were holy? They're called mothers. Or you're bringing the idea that it seems like they have an element of being part of the imahis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Listen, to marry Yaakov, you can't just be a small kleine, nothing. You definitely have to be something.
Yeah, like maybe the mother of Moshe and the wife of Moshe are considered like the mother in Yisrael, a mother in Yisrael. Like the book is written about the Rebbe's mother, called A Mother in Yisrael, based on the pasuk. So maybe these two emos, even though they weren't full emos like Rachel and Leah, they were like partial emos, Bill and Zilpah, and Yocheved, the mother of Moshe, is like the mother of Yisrael, and the wife of Moshe is like the mother of Yisrael. And maybe because Aaron blessed the Yidden, Elisheva is like the mother of Yisrael. I'm just saying off the top of my head possibilities. Okay, I'll mute myself.
Okay, yeah, Shkoyach, thank you for bringing what you found. It's always nice to hear some insights and things that people have come up with and seen. Okay, let's continue. We were talking about David HaMelech saying of how painful it is when a person has a wayward child in his house, inside his house, worse than the war of Gog and Magog. And David HaMelech said, "Marabu tzoroi, how abundant are my tzoros, are my suffering, and Rabbim come in Malai, many have come against me." And regarding the war of Gog and Magog, he sort of minimized it. It wasn't as bad. He didn't say the word marabu tzoroi, at least. He didn't minimize it, but he didn't say it's as bad as the tzoros, as the suffering that I have. So compared to the suffering, he didn't put it in the same league. Now we're up to the fifth wide line of the Gemara. Mizmar LaDavid, a psalm to David, when he was running away from Avshalom, his son. So I think on Friday I did mention about the story of Avshalom, how he tried to take over the kingship even in the days of his father, David HaMelech, King David. So this son of Avshalom was the son of an Eshes Yefas Toyar. He was the son of a woman that David HaMelech fell in love with during a war. And David HaMelech followed the laws of that we read in the parsha of Kiseitze, that when a man falls in love with a captive of his, then he has to wait 30 days, he has to shave her hair, let her fingernails grow long, and he has to wait 30 days, and then ultimately he can marry her. or he can live with her, and then he can convert her to Judaism and then marry her. There are different opinions of exactly the details of the technical details of how to go about what the exact ruling of Eshes Yifas Tayar. But basically, Avshalom was a child from this marriage. Now, the Midrashim talk about that when you marry an Eshes Yifas Tayar, you end up with the next part, Torah portion, where it talks about the Ben Seirer Umayra. In other words, the Torah really, Hashem doesn't really want you to marry an Eshes Yifas Tayar, but if you do, the Torah permits it because Dibra Torah Keneged Yetzer Hara. The Torah speaks against, towards your Yetzer Hara, meaning Hashem only gives us challenges that we can handle. And it seems that when a person is involved in a war and they fall in love with a captive of theirs, they feel a certain potential they seem to have a certain potential to they have a certain feeling of dominance and entitlement to be able to marry this Yifas Tayar, this woman who's beautiful, who's a captive, who he falls in love with. It's going to be too hard for him to say no. So the Torah permits it, because if Hashem would not permit it, you would do it anyway. And so this is one case where it would be almost impossible to overcome a person's Yetzer Hara. So therefore Hashem says, I'm allowing it. What does that mean? That really Hashem doesn't want you to do it. But because everything in the Torah has to be possible for you to fulfill, so therefore the Torah permits this, because it would be almost impossible for you not to, to overcome your desire, and therefore the Torah permits it. I always say that sort of shows that all the other mitzvahs in the Torah are 100% within your ability. This is the only case where it's possible, where you won't be able to control yourself. That means that all the other cases, you're 100% able to control yourself. But in any event, that's the story of David HaMelech marrying Ma'acha, who's this mother of Avshalom. And Avshalom is this child who sort of became a Ben Seirer Umayra. Avshalom is this child who sort of became like a rebellious son. And anyway, he does some terrible, terrible things. In addition to the fact that he starts a rebellion against David Melech Yisrael, David the king, the author of the Tehillim, David, Hashem's chosen one, the leader of Malchus based David, Hashem, and Avshalom, who is quite a smooth talker, he's able to get all the Sanhedrin on his side. He's obviously quite a Talmud Chacham. He probably knows how to talk to them. He knows how to butter people up. He looks beautiful. That's another thing that he had going for him. He was very, very handsome. One of the most handsome people in the world, Avshalom. And he utilized that, of course, to his benefit, to win people over. So this Avshalom, he started a rebellion against his father. So the Gemara here brings the Psalm in Tehillim where it says, Mizmar LeDavid bevarchai mepnei Avshalom b'nai. A psalm to David when he was running away from Avshalom, his son, because his son wanted to take over and possibly even kill him. And the question is, why do we call this a Mizmar? Is this a psalm to David? Mizmar LeDavid, Kina LeDavid. It should be a lament. It should be a Kina, a sad crying, a mourning of David, not a Mizmar, not a song of David. Kina LeDavid mi ba'ilei, it should be. So the Gemara answers, Amar Reb Shimon ben Avishalom. So Reb Shimon, or some say on the side, I see it says Avshalom. Reb Shimon, the son of Avshalom, very interesting. that Reb Shimon, the son of Avshalom, is going to talk about the person Avshalom. So Reb Shimon ben Avshalom, he says, this says sort of touches on Jerry's question about naming someone after like someone who was wicked, maybe Avshalom. His father, this Reb Shimon's was the son of Avshalom, at least according to some. The Ger says Avshalom. Some have it Avi Shalom, so maybe it's a different name. But anyway, so Reb Shimon, in the son of Avshalom, says, "Mashal mahadover doimer." What is this comparable to? La'adam sheyotza olav shtar choiv, a person who a debt document is brought out. So the man doesn't have enough money to pay it. Koydem sheproi, before he pays it, haya otzev, he's very sad. La'achar sheproi, after he pays it up, sameach, he's happy. It's all over. It's done. Baruch shepotrani, blessed, I'm now exempt. Once he pays it up, if he finally, no matter what it takes, but he gets done with it, he's happy. Afkan, here also. What does it mean here also? David HaMelech, of the story of David HaMelech. So David Kivan Ja'amar LaKadosh Baruch Hu, since Hashem told him, Hineni make him alecha ra'a mi beischa. David HaMelech, Hashem told him, I am going to establish evil from your house. That means from your house, there's going to be a rebellion from your own house. And what that means is that someone from David HaMelech's house is going to wreak havoc on David HaMelech. And Haya Otzev, he was very sad. David HaMelech was very sad when he heard that. Omar, he said, Shema Ebed Mamzerhu, Delay Chayas Olai. Maybe it's going to be a servant or a illegitimate child who's not who won't have mercy on me. Vicky, could you open the door? Vicky, can you open the door, please? Thank you. Shema Eved a Mamzer who delay chayas. Maybe it's an Eved or a Mamzer that is not going to have mercy on me. Delay chayas alike. There's a statement in the Gemara that says that an Eved or a Mamzer, they have negative traits, and they won't have mercy. They don't have mercifulness. I'm going to be done in 20 minutes. So an Eved or a Mamzer don't have mercifulness. So David HaMelech was nervous if an Eved or Mamzer are going to start up. David HaMelech, that'll be the end. David HaMelech is going to get killed. Kivan the Chazer de Avshalom, who, when he saw that it was Avshalom, Sameach, he was happy. Mishum Hachi Amar Mizmar. Because of that, he said Mizmar. And what that means is that Mizmar meaning a song, meaning he was happy. And what that means is that David HaMelech felt that Avshalom, although he's the child of a Eshes Yifas Toyar, and he might be a Ben Seira or Meira, but he's not going to kill his father. And what's interesting is that this is actually part of the story of Avshalom. What Avshalom did was, I mean, it's not, I don't know how well known it is to all of you. So I just mention it in short that Avshalom, he had two advisors. One advisor was Achitophel. Achitophel was an advisor to David HaMelech, but he changed sides when Avshalom started his rebellion. Achitophel chose to go with Avshalom. And Achitophel always had a grudge against David HaMelech. And And basically, Achitophel was not a righteous person. Obviously, he chose to go with Avshalom, and he was an advisor to Avshalom. And he gave advice to Avshalom that he should kill his father. He should kill David HaMelech. Do it right away. Do it soon. Now, David HaMelech had a friend, had a close person who he sent to be a spy and to mess things up for Avshalom. His name was Hushai. And Hushai went into the camp of Avshalom, and he became an advisor to Avshalom. Now, what type of an advisor was he to Avshalom? He was an agent, really, for David HaMelech, but he pretended to be an advisor to Avshalom, and he gave advice to Avshalom. Oh, don't go and kill David HaMelech yet. Wait until you have until we gather our army together, and then we'll put on a war, and we'll ultimately win over, and we're gonna take over. So Avshalom, who did he listen to? He listened to Hushai. Now, if he would have listened to Achitophel, it would have been the end of David HaMelech, at least logically. But he didn't want to listen to Achitophel. Why didn't Avshalom want to listen to Achitophel? He wasn't ready to go and kill his father outright. He did terrible things. He lived with all the concubines of his father in public to that extent. He did that. He had the chutzpah to live with the his father's concubines in public knowledge, like, we are not going back. There's no going back. Once we do this, this is over, and he did that. But to kill his father, he wasn't ready. He wasn't like, he wasn't ready to jump to that. Maybe he would have done it later on, but he wasn't, he had a certain mercifulness to him with all of his evil. He had that slight mercifulness. And that's what David HaMelech was happy about. And he was right about it. David HaMelech was correct. In other words, it's not that Avshalom really wanted to kill him. And what's interesting is David HaMelech was the same way to Avshalom. David HaMelech was very sad. He mourned when Avshalom died. It was like a terrible tragedy to him, even though this was the evil son who was bringing such trouble to David HaMelech. Nevertheless, it was extremely mournful when Avshalom died. Anyway, so that's why David HaMelech said Mizmar, a song, because he knew that it's Avshalom, and this is a son. It's not a mamzer. He doesn't have the bad traits that an Eved or a mamzer have.
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
It says over here that this whole thing where he said, it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, behold, I'm going to raise up evil against you from your house.
Yeah.
It says that this is all through Nasan, the Navi, after the incident of Bathsheba.
Right. Right. That was when the curse of this curse came on him. But when did all of these 4 tragedies happen? One of them being the Avshalom's rebellion. David HaMelech had 4 tragedies happen to him because basically Nasan Hanavi had told David a parable. He told him, what would you do? What should we do when there was a stranger, a guest came to a rich man's house, and the rich man had a neighbor that was poor, and he had one little sheep. And the rich man said, the guest said, "Oh, I'm hungry." So the rich man said, "Let me go to my neighbor and steal the sheep." And he stole the poor man's sheep that lived next door. While he's living it up and has all the wealth, he goes and steals the poor man's sheep next door. and feeds and slaughters it and feeds his guest. What should be done to this poor man? So David HaMelech said, that man, he should be killed, and he should he should he should pay 4 sheep back to the poor man. So sure enough, that is why 4 terrible things happened to David HaMelech. His baby, the baby that Bathsheba was pregnant with, died, and the story of, I think, Tamar being raped by Amnon, and then the story of Avshalom. And there's a 4th thing that's not coming to my mind. I don't know if it's Adoni. No, I have to look it up. But there's a 4th. There's 4 tragedies happened to David HaMelech, and so this is one of them. That Ra will come to Seich Beis. So this is like the 4 things, 4 punishments that David HaMelech accepted on himself, because he gave this verdict about this story, and that was a parable. It really wasn't a real story. It was really a parable about his own story, because he had Uriah killed, and he stole the sheep, so to speak, from Uriah, who was the poor man. So that's the story of that parable is really a story. Anyway, that's not really the discussion here. I just give you the full picture. Okay, so now that we've gone through the story of Avshalom, the Gemara now talks about if you are supposed to or allowed to start a fight with a wicked person or compete with a wicked person. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan. So we are now about 20 lines up from the bottom of the page, and we're on page 7b. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Mutter lehisgaros b'rishoyim ba'ilam hazeh. One is allowed to contend with the evil people, with Rishoyim, in this world. Now, what does that mean, in this world? Would you contend with evil people in the next world? What does it mean in this world? So one of the commentaries says that it means in this time when we are not in charge, we don't have the Bezdin to punish. And so when it says this world, it means in this era. And even in this era, you would be allowed to start up with the Rishoyim. Shenemar, as it says, Oizvei Torah Yahalalu Rasha. Those that forsake the Torah, they praise the Rasha. V'shoimrei Torah, but those that keep the Torah, Yisgaru Bam. They fight or contend with the evil people. So we see here the pasuk in Mishlei that says that you are allowed to be misgara with Rishoyim. Start up with them. Tanya Nami Hachi, and we also have a brisa like this. Rabbi Doistoi bereb Masain Omer. Rabbi Doistoi or Rabbah, and you see on the side there's another version. The son of Reb Masain, Reb Doistoi, the son of Reb Nassan, says you're allowed mutter lehisgaris b'rishoyim b'olam hazeh. You're allowed to start up with Rishoyim in this world. Shenemar, as it says, Oizvei Torah Yahalu Rasha. He brings that same verse, that those that forsake the Torah, they praise the Rasha. But the people who keep the Torah, they are Yisgaru Bam. They start up with the Rishoyim. Tanya, not 1 second. Ve'im lachshach adam. And if a person whispers to you, loymar, to say that we have a verse that says the opposite. Someone might tell you, are you sure you want to start up with the wicked? There is a verse that says the opposite. V'ksiv al tischar b'mereim. Don't start up with those that do evil. Al tekane ba'osei avla. Don't be zealous with those that do wickedness or crookedness. So how do you reconcile these two statements? On the one hand, it says you could start up with the wicked. On the other hand, it says don't be zealous when it comes to the wicked. So Amar law, you could tell the person who's whispering this to you, Mi shali by noikvoi omer kain. Only someone whose heart is banging him would say such a thing. Meaning that someone who has some sins inside him, only someone with a, that has things that he feels guilty about would say, don't start up. But if you're not feeling guilty, then if you don't have anything to feel guilty about, then you don't have to worry. Ella al tislar b'mereyim. So what does the verse mean? Don't start up with those that are evil. It means don't compete with them. Li yais kimereyim, to be like them. Don't compete. Compete doesn't mean to fight with them and say you're. It means to compete with them, to be like them. Don't try to compete with them and say, oh, he's enjoying life with all of his sins. I'm going to try to do the same thing. Don't do that. That's what it means. Don't compete. Doesn't mean don't fight with them. Al tekani b'yosei avla, when it says don't be zealous of those that do bad, do wickedness, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start up with them. Doesn't mean zealous. Actually, the word kina has two meanings. It could mean zealous. It could also mean jealous. Though in the Hebrew, just like in English, jealous and zealous are very similar. There's one letter difference. So in Hebrew, the same word actually could be used. Sometimes it's used for zealousy, and sometimes it's used for jealousy. And so the word tekane here, the Gemara is saying, it doesn't mean zealous. Don't be zealous against those that do evil. It means don't be jealous of those that do evil. To be like those that do evil. And it says, Al yakane libcha b'chatoyim. Don't be, and here you can see, does it mean zealous or jealous? Here you can tell from the verse what it really means. Al yakane libcha, let's try zealous. Your heart should not be zealous b'chatoyim, against the sinners. Kiyim b'yiras Hashem kol hayoyim. Rather, you should be zealous with yiras Hashem all day. Well, that doesn't sound right, because you wouldn't want to be zealous against the fearers. You're zealous. Don't be zealous against the sinners, but be zealous against the fears of Hashem. No, that doesn't work. So let's say jealous. Al yakane libcha. Your heart shouldn't be jealous against the sinners. Kiyim b'yiras Hashem kol hayom. You should be jealous of those that fear Hashem all day. And this is the source that jealousy is not a bad trait. It just depends on what you're jealous of. That you should be jealous of those that are better than you in spiritual matters.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes. Yes.
Why do they have to add in this world? Are there other worlds that you are allowed or not allowed to talk to the Rishayim?
So I answered that. I asked that question a few minutes ago, and I said that.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't get it.
So one of the commentaries explains that it means in this era. It doesn't mean in this world. It means in this era when we do not have full jurisdiction to rule. And even in such a time, there is such a thought that you'd be allowed to start up with the wicked, even though we don't really have the jurisdiction to punish them. In other words, our courts can't really do full punishments. like they should be allowed in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when we have the full authority. But nowadays we don't have full authority, even though there are bezdins nowadays, but they don't have the full authority. They have certain authorities. They can give divorces, they can do marriages, they can, there's certain things they can, bezdin can do. They can do monetary laws if people both sign and so on, but we don't have full authority to deal with wicked people and give them lashes or so on, whatever it is. We're limited. And so therefore, the Gemara says, Olam Hazeh, in this time, in this era.
Okay.
That's the
Thank
one
you.
commentary. I don't know if there might be other commentaries. I don't know if the Steinsaltz might have another a commentary, or if there's any other thoughts. In any event, so our Gemara is dealing with this contradiction and trying to explain that when it says you should not start up with them, it means that you shouldn't be jealous of them, but you can be zealous to them. You can act with zealousness, or that's the word, towards them, and fight them and be be a little rough or whatever with those that are evil. And we see this other pasuk also seems to say the same thing. Don't be jealous of the sinners. Rather, in other words, so the same word in it here, it means jealous. So they're also, you could translate along the same lines, that don't be jealous of them, but you can fight with them. So that's where we're going to stop. Want to wish you all a good day, a happy Hanukkah.